Hi, Sarosh. Welcome to the podcast Curious with Harshit. Super excited to have you here. This is our fourth episode and really interested in the work you are doing at Invact. Before you jump any further, how are you doing? What's going on?
Thanks, Harshit. Thanks for having me here. Excited to talk to you as well. I'm always happy to talk about our product journey and also great that you have me on here. And I'm doing great in office today. Doing the last minute polishing onto our product, which is about to go live soon.
Awesome. So, given the work you are doing, I think you have a very unique perspective into what's happening in the edtech space and how it is evolving. So, what are some of your initial thoughts on how the overall ecosystem is evolving for the edtech products in India? How do you see it?
Yeah, you're right. See, I think edtech has been one of those spaces that got a huge shift since COVID. It's one of those industries, the other being, say, productivity and in general video conferencing. EdTech also had like a huge shift. Like it got a massive push since COVID. Um, more people started getting comfortable with learning online, and that's resulted in visibly so many more companies have started up in this space. What that's also meant is that there are a new set of challenges, a new wave of problems that have come up that we have to solve. So overall, I think edtech as an industry, I would say, post pandemic and even after the pandemic has worn out, I think one clear thing is that hybrid learning is here to stay. Even if schools do open fully, I think we become comfortable to the idea that you can learn online, and in some cases, you can even learn better. So hybrid learning is going to be here, and I think we have to now figure out how do we, as part of with various edtech platforms, how do we support this? So that's one thing. Second thing is I think more people are now open to consuming education and learning online purely from a self-learning perspective. I think gone are the days where everybody wants to follow the same curriculum which is prescribed in the school, and now they want to venture out and follow sort of what they like to learn and build skills and interests on a personal basis. And so you see a lot more people open to studying online, right? Whether the pandemic happened or not, there are people who have started looking out online for more learning. And then I think thirdly, I think the other big thing that's happening that I'm noticing is the rise of cohort programs. Lots of different kinds of cohorts coming up. Different edtech platforms are supporting this now. But the idea that you can be a part of a group of people who are located all over the world, and you're a single cohort and you've subscribed to a program and you go through it, and then your experience is sort of yours alone. Like every cohort has a different outcome. I think this concept is getting warmed up a lot, and a lot of people are subscribing to it.
It's actually true, as in what you said. Like initially, also we were seeing some signs of this cohort-based courses actually coming up, but they were not that popular. But with COVID and like more focus on the community building aspects of this, I think that has actually accelerated. You described like three verticals of like how you see edtech space. How do you see Invact position along these verticals?
Yeah, I think what we're doing at Invact is super exciting. I think there's very clear vision and how we want to execute it. So what we want to do is we want to provide a platform which provides the best in class learning experience for students to learn and then for teachers to teach. Right? We want to become that de facto platform where all learning happens. And the way we want to do this is through a bunch of things, primarily being the metaverse. I think that's something that people are associating with us right now, and we talk a lot about it. The idea is that, look, learning has gone online. We know online learning is here to stay, but there's a lot of research that has gone into why learning outcomes for students have dropped since learning has moved online. There's no dearth of research. You can literally Google this and you'll come up with lots of concepts, varying from things like Zoom fatigue to all of the technology issues that you face during learning, to the lack of social interaction that happens. All of these have contributed to basically lower learning outcomes. And this is where we come in. And we're saying that, hey, we're going to build a metaverse experience, which is essentially the way to think about this is it's a world that we're building online. And it's number one, immersive, which means you're inside the world as opposed to being outside of it, like how I am. Like we are currently outside of this experience. You're going to be inside of it. Think of it like either like playing a game or using a VR headset and being inside the world. So it's immersive. Second thing is it's going to be experiential, which means everything you see in the world is something you can experience. You can interact with objects. You can interact with people. And thirdly, it's going to be social. So you will not be doing this alone. Building on the concepts of cohort-based programs, and I think cohort programs have shown that they are very successful in delivering learning outcomes. So building on top of that, what we're saying is we'll provide a social layer of learning, and you will learn along with your peers. You will learn along with your teachers, and together, all of these three things happen together, and then you achieve your learning outcome. So that's basically how we're looking to play here.
Got it. One very interesting thing I noticed is what you mentioned, like a lot of focus in edtech especially has been on figuring out the learning aspects of things, but you also mentioned like you also want to improve the teaching experience. So how are you thinking about it? Essentially, do you think like bringing this immersive experiences is going to help along those lines?
Yeah, look, for us, it's very clear that we have two customers. It's the student and the teacher, and both of them are equally important. And I don't think you can build an edtech product that focuses on just one of them. I think anyone who does that is basically going to fail. So we're very clearly looking at both personas. And coming to the teacher side of things, there are a bunch of problems that teachers face today. I think one I can clearly talk about is going through the mechanics of creating a course and administering it and delivering it is a lot of hassle. In a traditional university or a school or a college, you have an entire team available with you. You spend a lot of time building a course, planning out the schedule. You have a massive administration department who helps with planning all of this, and then you deliver the course. So you have the whole school administration helping you out. But when you're running a program online as an independent teacher, you don't get out of that. So the first area for us to focus on is building all of those tools that are necessary for a teacher to create a course, plan the course, deliver it, create the assessments, evaluate the assessments. There's a bunch of different workflows. I think all of this falls in the LMS space that we call it, the learning management solution space. There's a bunch of work that can be done there. Number two, I think how we can help teachers is in helping them figure out new pedagogies, new ways of teaching, and especially because we're going to a medium which is the metaverse, where what worked on Zoom might not work on the metaverse. So the metaverse allows you now, opens up the possibilities a lot more. You now have access to, for example, say even back in school, content was all on a 2D blackboard. Even on Zoom, content is basically sharing your screen, which is going to be a PPT. But in the metaverse, you can now bring in 3D content, content that you can interact with, students can interact with. And basically, this allows you to explain concepts a lot better, right? We've gone through our entire schooling imagining the z-axis when we learned coordinate geometry. Here's the opportunity to actually show students what the z-axis is and then visualize it in the right way. So I think just from a pure content perspective, it opens up so many possibilities. This is just one example. The other example of being leveraging new content possibilities is in the space of case-based studies. uh, I've come from a B school where I was taught case studies, and we basically had like 15-page or 20-page cases that we had to read, and then we would discuss in the class, right? And what I remember is a lot of these cases had a lot of context setting, right? It would be 10 pages just explaining what the context is, like which era was a particular company operating, and what industry are we looking at, what are the sort of trends in this industry. Now all of this could actually be made experiential. For example, I could teleport you to a world where you're actually sitting in that era or in that space, and I actually observe. And this is how the real world works. In the real world, nobody's going to come and give you information in a booklet and ask you to, figure out what our strategy should be. The real world is actually observing information and then devising strategies out of it. So I think that opens up another huge world, which is you now have the ability to create your own worlds and then teach through it. So I think on the content front, I'm super excited. There's just so many things you can do. The other example is simulation labs, right? Creating games and simulations and teaching through that. That opens up another door. So yeah, I think these are two things that we are focusing on at Invact. One is the basic hygiene of give the teachers the ability to automate a lot of their workflows so that they go through the mechanics of creating courses and delivering it. And the second is on the actual pedagogy side, allow them to find new ways of creating content and teaching through that.
Got it. Like the content piece you were talking about, I am just thinking of so many possibilities there. Like you can target anyone who is trying to learn almost anything across domains or verticals. This will be helpful for them. So, given like you had such a broad, like say like if you're trying to solve for or making the content consumption really immersive experience with this, how did you sort of decide on like this is the user segment we want to target first?
Hey Harshit, I lost you for a bit, but I'll just relay what I heard. Was your question that why have you started with the MBA and this is
Yes,
this? Okay,
right.
got it. Honestly, I think the MBA, couple of reasons, right? So the first one is I think there's a clear gap in the market when it comes to MBA as a course. Um, MBAs today are far more theoretical than they should be. An MBA, unlike most STEM degrees, should not be theoretical. I don't think even STEM should be theoretical, but there's a larger element of theory in STEM than in MBA, right? An MBA is all about figuring out business and business studies. And that, in my opinion, should not be theoretical. And therefore, that's where we felt like, there's a gap in the market. Today, even tier one B schools are not as industry oriented as they should be. Um, and not even talking about tier two and tier three. The case is really bad with tier two and tier three B schools. So coming to when you look at those B schools, I think the quality of education, the quality of content that's being taught is really poor. So we came in and said, you know what, we're going to give an awesome platform where amazing learning will happen, but we'll double down on this, right? We'll go one step ahead. We'll actually get industry professionals who have excelled in their domains to come and teach content from their experience, and that is what actually matters, because you're going to study all of these business foundations, these business studies, and then you're going to work in a setup where you're expected to apply these concepts. And what's the point of learning all of this when you can't apply it? So the cornerstone for our program is what we call the proof of work. So it's a 16-week program where we will make you do 16 proof of work capstone projects. And these projects are basically designed in a way where they are basically the work that you would do in a job, right? And at the end of the course, when you have 16 comprehensive capstone projects made, you can take that as a portfolio, go to a recruiter and say, you know what, this is all of the stuff that I've done as part of my Impact MBA course, and this is why I'm going to be a good fit for your organization. So that's why we started with the MBA course. Having said that, the metaversity as a platform is completely agnostic of the course that you're teaching, right? We started with the MBA because as a founding team as well, I think we felt comfortable teaching this. And of course, we felt like there's a gap in the market. But tomorrow, if there's a similar course in another market, I think our platform should be able to bring that on. And our long-term strategy is to become a platform where we invite creators and teachers to bring their courses on.
Wow, very interesting. So this is like sort of building initial infrastructure so that you can also empower teachers and creators to bring out what they actually want to teach. Very interesting. So now I'm really thinking about like the immersive experience is at the core of what you're building. It is like your short term and your long term strategy to get that uh, learning together feeling in the cohorts. So how do you see the adoption right now? Like with Invact MBA, is it already happening? Because like we are very, very early in the metaverse. Even like the term itself is quite new. I'm not even sure about adoption, especially in India. So what's the status of that right now, and how are your current cohort doing it?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So the adoption is still the early days when it comes to virtual reality and metaverse. Metaverse, I think, is a very loosely coined term. You can very well make an argument that most large open social networks out there are sort of metaverses in themselves. But I think when you talk about the VR part of it or the immersive part of it, I think those are still obviously very new. So a couple of things I want to call out here. I think the first thing is that what we're building is keeping in mind accessibility, right? We don't want to build something which is very very niche and only people with VR headsets can use. So we're actually building something that can be accessed cross platform, whether you're on a mobile phone, a tablet, a laptop, or a VR headset, right? So you can use what we're building everywhere. Because of this, we're building on the web, and this has actually made our own job harder for us, because we are now putting in constraints that come in with building on the web. But we're very clear in our vision that we want to build something which is cross-platform, because we want the reach. We want everyone to be able to access this. So that's what's most important for us. Having said that, we obviously want to ride the advantages that come along with VR headsets, and at some point, VR headsets will become a lot more common. And at that point, I think the VR headset will become a primary device of both consumption and creation. But until that happens, we are happy with people using our experience on the laptop and the phone. Coming to how the adoption has been so far, I think one thing that we're seeing among students is, and this is good validation for us, is that when a user, in this case who's a student, applies for a course, they are doing that for the outcome that they get, and not necessarily because of like what technology you're going to use to teach, right? And on our website, when you go to our website today, if you go and look at our course, we are very clearly telling you what are the learning outcomes that you will achieve after finishing our course. We don't tell you what topics we teach because we feel that's immaterial. And anybody can bring up a list of topics, but we're telling you what are the outcomes that you will have after you complete the course. And I think that is what students are applying for. So they're applying to our course because they will be able to do these things at the end of the course. Whether you teach in the metaversity or you teach them anywhere else, I think that's a little secondary. Of course, they buy into the idea that teaching in the metaverse is going to be a lot more easier, it's going to be effective, the efficacy of learning will be higher. But at the end of the day, they're applying because of the outcomes, and not necessarily because of the tech.
Right. Yeah, I think from if we think from a learner's perspective, what they're trying to achieve out of the course, that itself gives them enough confidence to sort of take a decision on whether to enroll or not. Just to come back to the like your long-term products you are planning to build. Essentially, when I think of products, it's actually thinking just like mobile-first products right now, and the entire product building process is like it is not very standard, but across the org you can find very similar things on how the product development, the entire process works. So now when
Right.
you're building such immersive experiences, how do you think about it? Because just like it opens so many more verticals to think about and take into consideration, while like right from conceptualization to taking it live to the users on so many variables changing. So can you just run me through that on how that happens?
Yeah, we're figuring this out as well. In fact, I think at some point when our product is out and we've run our course, we should be able to publish a playbook on how do you build on the metaverse as well. Honestly, I think this is a great learning experience for us. We're learning together, but I think already, even though we haven't shipped yet, there's still so many learnings. So to your first point, I think we've not taken a mobile first view of our product. I think this is one of those. Even back at Microsoft, everything we did was because we knew mobile is the most ubiquitous computing device, right? People are spend the most amount of time on mobile. So you wanted to build all your products keeping in mind that they should be accessible on mobile phone. But we've taken a conscious call where we're saying, okay, you know what? A few things will be accessible on the mobile phone, but the core aspect of learning in a classroom, that's not well suited on a mobile phone. A mobile phone is a small device, comes with a small viewport. It's too easy to get distracted when you're on a phone, and therefore we don't recommend that users use mobile phones to join classes. So from that standpoint, I think we're actually trying to push people towards a larger device, say a laptop or a desktop, and have them use that. But having said that, there's what we're doing at Invact is we're building more than just the classroom experience. We're building the social experiences where you have fun, where you socialize with your friends, where you do your group assignments, and some of those can be done really well on the mobile, and those we prioritize to have them built primarily for mobile. Coming to your larger question, as in like how are we looking to build on the metaverse, right? I think couple of strategies, and these might be very high level, and I can definitely talk a lot more after we've shipped and we've got some learnings. But the approaches that we're taking are number one, we're looking at how a typical cohort is run today on various platforms, like all of the other edtech platforms, and we've come up with a playbook of what a successful cohort looks like, right? Like, let's say if you could do this in the real world, how would you do it? So we've built a playbook for that. The second step is to see how can we port these experiences onto a metaverse world. uh, this is really the crux of the entire product, and this is where the most amount of challenges come, because one way to do this is to just take everything as it is in the real world and try to mimic it in the metaverse. However, by doing that, that might be a good start, But by doing that, number one, you could be undermining certain things that happen easily in the real world, but then in the metaverse that might not happen easily, but you just expect it to happen, but then you realize, oh, this is a trivial thing that I thought people would automatically do, but they're not doing it in the metaverse. That's one. The number two, the other challenge is, you could be actually not optimizing well for the metaverse, right? The real world comes with its own constraints, and when you go to the metaverse, there's no need to carry those constraints in, right? You can actually break free from some of them, and if you try to just mimic the real world, you don't see those, right? And then you end up building something which is exactly like the real world. So I think we're constantly trying to figure out one and two, right? These couple of things. We're constantly trying to see where can we push the envelope in terms of breaking the real world, keeping in mind that people also need to go through a learning curve. And the other thing is figuring out what are the easy things to build first.
Got it. Yeah, currently the way you are running the course, it's basically, since you said like you are trying to get users to move to a larger screen so that they can focus better while they are learning. There's more. Is it similar to a gaming experience like what we do laptop gaming? Is that also a aspect you are trying to bring in here?
Yeah, I think there are parallels to how games are built. I think all your AAA game titles, you prefer to play, like the game publisher always prefers to have them played on like a proper large screen device with certain specs and all. I think there are parallels. One thing we're clear is we're not trying to build a game, right? And I think that's the small difference is that um, I mean, the games that we play are the objective is clear, and you're playing that game to compete with someone or something, and you meet the game objective. For us, it's more about bringing the real world experiences inside a social or an immersive environment, right? So for us, it could be a little more open ended, right? So what we're not going to do is we're not going to put artificial games inside our product saying, what, go on a quest, do this, do that, right? That's not what we're here for. We're here because you've ultimately subscribed to a course, and we're here to provide you the right platforms and the right tools to let you learn in the best way. Right? From that sense, I think we're a little different from like building a typical game which has like a clear end goal in mind, and you have to do XYZ to finish the game, right? It's that's not what we're building. But otherwise, I think the parallels are there.
Got it. So another question I have is like, I think you will get better clarity from real users once you release on the metrics part of things. What are you trying to like, I am thinking of like what metrics you'd be tracking post release, and uh, you don't really want users to spend a lot of time also here. It's like you should essentially enable them to achieve those learning outcomes. So
Yeah.
how are you translating that into product metrics, and how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, no, great question, and I think we've done a lot of work on this. And what I can say is, the North Star metric is very clear for us, which is what you said, which is learning outcomes, right? And because I think EdTech as a space has a difficult time trying to establish learning outcomes, especially in the in the K-12 segment, where it's not really clear if like, okay, a student took a course, but is a student smarter or not? Like nobody really knows. Because of this, I think it helps that we are going with the market, with the MBA market, where the course outcome is actually employment. So for us, in fact, the true North Star metric for us is, have we been able to improve employability of the person who subscribed? And that's a more tangible outcome, and we can actually measure that. So that's our North Star metric. Now, if I break that down, I think the course outcome can be broken down into learning outcomes. Now, we feel confident that if you actually take away those, I think we have a set of 50 bullet points on our website. If you take away those learning outcomes, then you should be employable. So then the next question is, have students actually achieved those learning outcomes? So that's the next level. I think breaking that further down into, say, the product, I think what will eventually happen is we are looking at learning. So we've done a lot of ground up research on how learning happens. And what we say is that learning happens in three spaces. One is primarily your classroom, right? A bulk of the learning happens in the classroom. So when you're spending time in the classroom, you learn a lot of things. Your teacher is teaching, your teacher is giving a lecture, so you learn from that. You might be doing a case-based discussion, so you're learning from your peers. But not all learning happens there. There's a second place where learning happens, and that's the social space, So that is basically the space where you go outside the classroom. You don't have your teacher anymore, but you have your peers, right? It could be when you're sitting with your learning group and you're doing a group assignment, or it could just be, unstructured conversations that you're having with your peers, and you have serendipity happen. That's the second space. And the third space where learning happens is in a private space, right? You're alone by yourself. You're reflecting on everything you learned in class, all the conversations that you had with your friends, and you sort of synthesize all of it, and then you learn. So for us, we've divided into these three things. And as a product, we'll measure how learning is happening in all of these three spaces, right? And that in terms of low level product metrics, this could be something as simple as engagement time, not absolute time, which is engagement would be more of like quality time that you spend. So it would be, I think, the questions you've asked, or the amount of quality interactions you've had with your friends. So we've identified like key use cases, and time spent in those use cases is what we would say would imply success for us.
Very interesting. I always feel sort of a bit conflicted also when I think of like optimizing the metrics for ethics, especially like which is like sort of targeting users in the school segment, because like how much time they're spending versus learning, that's not really clear. And I often think about this question on how this like different companies are measuring it. Got it. So another aspect I would like to touch here is like the proof of work you talk about, which is another very core concept to Invact, which essentially we talked about like two personas. One is like student, another is teacher, and the third one will also come in, which is the employer. So you want to enable the students to sort of showcase their proof of work and enable employer also to look at it. So uh, how exactly like I also looked at the modules you have for the MBA course. So each proof of work, like how are you visualizing it right now, and how can like it become sort of tangible for the employers also to look at it? Because the way I'm thinking is like everyone is, this is like what I'm thinking is how do you make it different from an assignment? Because what we used to do back in college is like assignments used to be very common across, like everyone is at the end of the day submitting it. So how is proof of work different from that?
Yeah, no, great question, and we're constantly striving to be better at this as well. So I think the way we've approached this is, first we've spoken to a lot of hiring managers, right? Like we just had exhaustive number of interviews with hiring managers to actually understand what are they looking for in potential employees, and we've tried to map that to various skills. And these could be hard skills, as in like functional skills, like technical skills, and it could be soft skills. Like we've tried to build this whole massive skill tree, and then we're saying, okay, how can we teach these skills in a manner that they can ultimately create an artifact, which we'll call the proof of work, which then the recruiter can see and clearly take a hire or a no hire decision. So that's been our process. So what this has meant is that our proof of work is ideally turning out to be, in some cases, you actually going out there and doing the work. For example, in our marketing course, in the last 4 weeks, when you take the marketing specialization, you are actually going to be creating a D2C brand. You are actually going to be creating, say, with no code tools, a website. You're going to actually run campaigns, optimize it for a certain segment, um, go through the motions of creating social media presence, and etc. So there is no better proof of work than doing the work itself. So we're going to make you do all of this, and we're going to document it in a way where it's presentable, right? Because ultimately, a recruiter does not have the time and the energy to go through everything you've done. So we're going to make it a little concise and present it in a way that they can consume it. But the idea is to make you do work which is as close as possible to the real work that you'll do in the industry.
Got it. Yep, makes sense. I think like if you think about it currently for product designers, I think it's slightly easier for them to showcase this proof of work because they maintain their portfolio. But like as PMs, it is actually difficult on how do you show this proof of work.
Yeah.
So another aspect of essentially proof of work is that these are like individual assignments you are making students complete, and each of it sort of then at the end of it becomes a portfolio which they can share with their employer, right?
Exactly. That's how we're looking to do this. Yeah. And you,
Got
you
it.
brought up the interesting question of what does a PM portfolio look like, and we spent a lot of time brainstorming this as well. And I think the idea is that I think we've cracked that as well. I think there is solid proof of work that we've come up for PMs as well. Unfortunately, it requires you to work with multiple stakeholders, which at the end of the day is how PMs work, right? Like there's very rarely do you say, okay, this person's a successful PM, but his or her team failed, right? Like there's no PM who's successful when the product fails. So I think an important part of a PM's work is how do you get work done and how do you eventually ship a product. So our PM specialization track actually gets you to do it. So in 4 weeks, we will get you through the motions of building and shipping, and that becomes a solid proof of work.
Got it. Understood. So just zooming out a bit, like we sort of went into details of the kind of products you're trying to build and enabling students to show proof of work. Overall, I see like this space is very rapidly evolving across the globe. There are going to be a lot of changes. Like, let's just take any example. Like VR headset currently, they are sort of not so popular, or not many people have sort of given it even a try till now. And we might see a device 5 years down the line which is very very popular and like sort of becomes a device which everyone has. So very rapidly evolving space. How do you think of like building products given that like both edtech and the metaverse both are so rapidly evolving?
Yeah, no, good question. I think we are constantly on the lookout of like what, in terms of hardware and platforms on which we offer our products, how is that space evolving? We're constantly on the lookout for it. So we've got like in-house, we've got all of the different VR headsets that you have out there. So we purchase all of these, um, and we're constantly looking at it. So I think one thing that we feel strongly about is that the VR headset as a device is going to become a lot more common in the near future. I think Manish talks about this, and he spoke about how I think in the last year there were more VR headsets sold than Xboxes. So it's just sort of starting to show that people are looking at this as a device that can become a lot more popular. So I think the VR headset as a device, I think it's still a little early. I think the device itself will go through as your Oculuses and HoloLenses come out with more versions. You're gonna see monumental improvement in their versions, because I think it's still early, and this space is only going to explode a lot more. So we are actually betting a lot on VR headset as a device, and the good thing is a lot of the big companies are also betting on it. So it's up to the Facebooks and the Microsofts of the world to make this more popular, and they will, right? Because they have a lot riding on it. Outside of this space, I think there are some fringe devices out there, but I think it's still too early for them to even start breaking into the mainstream population. VR headsets is what we're focusing on right now. But yes, tomorrow if something else comes up, we're more than happy to build on it. And this is where the beauty of building on the web yields a lot of results, because no matter what the device of the future is, it is most likely going to support web in some form, because nobody wants to build a device which is completely closed and then you have to start building all the applications from scratch, right? So as a device manufacturer, you wouldn't want to be, as an OEM, you don't want to be in that state. So building for the web gives you that head start. So even, for example, when VR headsets came out, they did start supporting the browser from day one. So I think that's what we are banking on right now.
Very interesting. That was not something I was aware of as well. So I was actually on this, I was watching one of the talks of Mark Zuckerberg, and he actually says like what they are trying to build is like again a platform on which other creators can come and build products which their audience or users can use. So if you have to, if say Facebook's VR become very popular, I think being a browser first gives you that advantage that you will be already present over there, right?
Yeah, that does. And I think eventually we'll have to take a call on, do we want to natively build on, say, Oculus? And we might, right? I think if there's obviously advantages of building something which is available on the store, because it gives you like greater visibility. It's the same classic question of like, do you build a mobile app or do you just make a mobile site? I think the same thing happens. So you have like a proper store on an Oculus headset, and building on that store will give you greater visibility. More people try out your application. But I think a good way of testing out the device is always by building on the web, because you don't need to be on the store. You don't have to take that cost of building for a specific device. You build it once on one platform and then it just becomes available everywhere. And then basis, I think, your strategy and where you want to spend your time and effort, you can always take that call of building native apps for different devices.
Got it. Understood. Also, another question on similar lines. I think the folks you will be hiring in the team right now, it'll be their first time working on such a product which keeps like this immersive experiences at central so much. So, given like different backgrounds they are coming from, how do you sort of onboard them and essentially enable them think along the directions of what you actually want the final product to look like?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think so. At least on the engineering, the overall engineering team, which is comprised of UI UX designers, PMs, and developers. I think from the developers, let me talk about all of them individually. For developers, we are clearly looking at a certain stack, which is built on 3JS and React 3 Fiber. So I think if you've worked on that stack, then what we're doing is not very new. I think there are a lot of people who build sort of web-based immersive experiences. So that's a particular stack we're looking for. But in general, I think if you're a good front end developer, you should be able to learn these. These are essentially at the end of the day just another library. So you should be able to learn and contribute on it. From a designing standpoint, there are two main roles. So there's UI UX designing, and then there's 3D designing. So the 3D designing will go into designing the world itself, the spaces, and then how do you interact with objects. And then the UI UX designing is your classic UI UX designing, which is basically where do you put all the controls on your screen, and basically, I mean, stepping back a little bit, that would just be UI, but stepping back, thinking of user experience as a complete journey. And then finally for PMs, I think from a PM standpoint, what I'm at least looking at when we are hiring new people is huge degree of comfort in working in 0 to 1, because a lot of the things that we're doing is very hypothesis driven right now. We've done a lot of research, but nobody's done this what we're building. Nobody's built that at scale, so we don't know if some of these things will work at scale or not. So one of the things is just being comfortable building 0 to 1 and having super strong first principles thinking, because I think some of the problems we're solving, we're going down at first principles level. Like, why does Zoom not work for education? Like, can you give an answer beyond the fact that there are, like, Zoom is not meant for education? Right? So those are the kind of questions we're asking, and candidates who show good ability thinking at that level, those are probably good fits. 3D designers, for them this is not new. For them, I think the only new part is how do you design something which can be performant on the web, because 3D designing as a space has always been about building native experiences, and they can just go crazy, right? They can build really high def GBs worth of data gets downloaded, but we can't do that. We're building on the web, and we can't be that slow. So I think the challenge for the 3D designing team is to build things that look good, but at the same time don't take a lot of our performance, basically. I think that's an interesting challenge for the designers.
So essentially, like, say you will be building a lot of elements in your product, and if you are doing it on web, you need really good, say, internet speed. So
Right.
how are you thinking about solving for the cases where like either the users do not have really good internet, or do you think like building these immersive experiences on current internet might be a problem, and you would need to look at higher speeds for it to be more seamless?
Yeah, no, so I think network bandwidth is something we're very, very aware of. I think right from day one, when we started building the experience, we have all of our benchmarking in place to make sure that we are not taking up a lot of. So there are two things we're looking at. One is just bandwidth consumption, and then also basically local consumption, like as a device, like how much of RAM are we taking, how much of compute are we taking, right? So these three parameters are sort of our golden QoS metrics. And for us, the target is that we, like today, for example, right now, I'm doing the Zoom call over my Wi-Fi. And our target is we should do as good as, if not better, than Zoom or Google Meet. And over so we basically don't transfer more information over the wire than what Zoom or Google Meet does. And then on the local client side, we don't take up a lot of RAM and a lot of CPU compute, so that even people on slightly older laptops or older phones can still use our experiences. Of course, it will always be a battle. Like, we can't support every computer out there, every phone out there, and we will at the end of the day have like a min specs line, just like any other game out there has. But we will constantly try and push it, right? We will be pushing it so that it gets open to more people. So I think right now we're quite successful. So if you have like any laptop you've purchased in the last 3 years, for example, right, should be able to run what we're building very easily.
Got it. Very interesting engineering optimization problem as well, I think, for you. So yeah, I think I have a much better understanding of what you are trying to build overall, and how you are trying to enable all three user personas with the product. Apart from this, like about you, like again, we talked about this rapidly evolving spaces. How do you keep yourself up to the pace? How do you sort of read up? Like, what are your go-to resources in general for learning?
Yeah, I think it's, for me personally, I do a very organic way of learning. I don't, I mean, obviously you want some domain knowledge and you spend some time reading up about about that domain. I think specifically for the metaverse, there is so much written. I mean, I just open up my Twitter and I literally get lost reading things. But I think a lot of good literature has come out on the metaverse. I think one I particularly follow is Andrew Hall's literature. I think he's written a lot of like good primers, and then how he thinks this space will evolve. So that's my go-to space. But apart from it, I do, like I said, I do a lot of organic learning, because I think as a PM, what happens is, if you try to do very directed learning, like, hey, we're just going to learn about this particular thing, you lose out the bigger picture. So I'm constantly, I've subscribed to a bunch of various newsletters. I try to I just try to have good conversations with other product people in the field, just learning from their experiences. I think at this point, my goal is to be a little heads down and get our product out. So a lot of other things are happening around, which is mainly distraction. So my goal is to not get affected by all of that and just getting what we're building out. From a learning perspective, it's just going to be very organic. The other thing that I'm doing is, I'm also, I think since I joined Invact, apart from the metaverse, I've started reading up a lot about the edtech space and how pedagogy has evolved in teaching. I think that's been interesting. I didn't think I would spend a lot of time there, but I have, and I've read a lot of good material on that, and how people are foreseeing, with elements of virtual reality coming in, how will pedagogy evolve.
Yeah, very interesting. As in, it's not, again, at the end of the day, you are building this immersive experiences, but it is to solve this learning outcomes which we talked
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Got so. Thanks, Arosh. Very interesting conversation with you. Wishing you all the best for your upcoming launch.
Thank you so much, Harshit. Thank you for these questions.